Welcome to Nerdling Rush, your source for everything nerdy and fun.
I'm Mo.
And I'm Dom. There's the Dom and Mo show back at it again. No, there's just two of us today.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's it.
It's usually a bigger crowd. I miss the family. I love us, but I miss the family.
You know what? Sometimes it's good to have, just two voices going. That way I find, our listeners sometimes get a little bit more of a compact episode.
That's fair. I'm looking at the docket for today, and this is not going to be compact.
No, it's not compact, but we'll get through it all for you today. We've got a lot to go through. Mo, what is first?
Okay, so we are going to go through something that's a couple of stories that are like really sciencey and cool, and then get into like the hardcore sort of comic books and movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So, cool sciencey things that have happened recently. You had a DNA surgery on an embryo, on a living embryo, to correct a genetic disorder, successfully carried out for the very first time.
That's crazy.
So this is something that has been in the works for a long time, ever since like Dolly the sheep really like captured people's attention with cloning and genetic research. Since then, we've mapped the human genome, CRISPR, DNA splicing, and everything has been worked on. So what happened was a Chinese university used a form of genetic editing, not CRISPR, it's something called base editing, to correct a genetic disorder in a lab-made embryo. The embryo itself wasn't then implanted or anything, but what they basically did was created an embryo in a lab setting, made sure that embryo would have, like, here's a genetic disorder that happens to people and animals and stuff, and then they just went through this editing process, fixed the genetic anomaly, and created a viable embryo out of that. Never been done before. It's something that was always kind of theorized. So what does that mean going forward? Like, on the one hand, it's amazing because, okay, we're going through the process of refining techniques to fix genetic anomalies within people, which would be amazing for getting rid of a lot of hereditary diseases, and fixing some horrible health issues.
Right.
It of course raises all the moral implications and stuff, which is actually something that should be discussed in depth by a podcast that isn't about Batman. That is its own thing, but we are living in future times, and it's really cool to me.
No, it's cool. It's definitely awesome, the fact that we can do that at this point. Yeah,
it's super cool. In other news, we do need to give a nod to the death of Hugh Hefner. So if you're sitting there wondering, well, you guys are the ones that kind of cried over Leonard Nimoy's death, what do you care about Hugh Hefner? It's not just because we're two guys in a room.
That'd be a great title for the autobiography of the podcast. Two guys in a room.
Well, okay, so like I've seen a lot of people in the wake of his death go, yeah, he was such a bro, and look at him, like he lived the high life, just surrounded by scantily clad beautiful women. He was such a baller and everything. You don't understand the history of the man. Hugh Hefner was a product of the sort of cultural stagnation almost of the 50s.
Yeah, and wasn't he like one of the 60s like sexual liberation pioneers?
Exactly, that's exactly what he was. So in the 50s, you still had prohibition in full swing. He actually grew up in a very tightly controlled Puritan household and everything, and he rebelled against it. So in the 60s, when he launched Playboy, he was one of the champions that came out and said, sex is fun. Sex is enjoyable. It's enjoyable for men and women, and we should pay attention to that. He was one of the champions of that movement. Unfortunately, the movement kind of got away from him, and he became very sort of old school in his ideas, like within a 10-year period.
Yeah.
But the reason why we're mentioning him on our show everyone thinks of Playboy and they think of the airbrush models that are always submissive and all of this stuff and the sort of connotations that come with that. But no one ever remembers why the excuse, I read it for the articles, exists. Because Playboy was a pioneer in the types of literature that it was publishing. For example, there was a short story published in Playboy that no other magazine, literary or otherwise, would touch. And it was published, I think, in the mid-'60s. What it showcased was a world in which heterosexual men were vilified by a predominantly gay and lesbian society. No one wanted to touch this short story. Hugh Hefner published it in his magazine, and when he was asked about it at the time, because he was someone that made open his support for the LGBTQ community, he just said, if it's unreasonable to vilify heterosexual men on these grounds, why is it okay to vilify homosexual men on these grounds? Because it was just an inversion of what times were like then. Like, he stood for his causes and everything, at least when you spoke to the man. And it wasn't just like that story. A lot of very big names in science fiction and fantasy that would go on to have illustrious careers got their start, or at least had a lot of their early work published through him. Margaret Atwood and Ray Bradbury really stand out because they had short stories and articles about feminism, about sexuality, about the status quo in society, published in the 60s and 70s in Playboy magazine. The man's legacy is complex, but it would be remiss of us to not give him his due. So thank you for your service in what it was, and for the good that you did and tried to do. And
help boasting the careers of fantasy writers that we enjoy today.
Yeah, without a doubt. He had a very complex life. And a very cool life.
He's the Stan Lee for the adult entertainment industry.
Much
like we have Stan around the same time too.
Yeah. And it's funny. We talked about how Joss Whedon's ideas kind of at his time. He was kind of revolutionary, and by modern standards, he's kind of lagged behind. The same thing happened to Hugh Hefner, only it happened within a decade with him.
Yeah.
Whereas it took about 20 years for Joss Whedon.
But with that, we move on from scantily clad women in magazines and men who fronted movements straight into our next topic of the day.
So we've got a slew of casting news and cool things.
Oh, so much.
So let's start off after a couple of heavy stories with something that's a little bit more light and fun. We have some casting news out of the Tom Hardy Venom film.
Yes. Oh, I actually kind of like this casting. This is really good.
So we have Riz Ahmed cast for the film. Not sure what role he's going to play, but we also recently had Michelle Williams approached into the film. She's supposed to be playing an attorney or a district attorney or something. Not sure if she's going to be
heroing about
or even being the love interest for Tom Hardy. So not really sure on what the role of her character is, but she's apparently been cast into the film.
I kind of like the casting. I hope it's not wasted. Riz Ahmed, really good. If you don't know him, he was the pilot in Rogue One. He's done other stuff since then, but that's probably the biggest, most notable thing.
You'll see him more in British movies. That's traditionally where he gets his roles and stuff. I respect the living hell out of the man.
I love him casting in the film, and Michelle Williams, very talented woman. I'm really excited to see what she brings to the film and what direction they're really going to go with this movie, right? Because we were talking a little while ago about how you could do Agent Venom potentially.
Yeah.
Right. Or we're gonna get maybe we could get the
Eddie Brock anti-hero style Venom. Yeah. Because like that's an important thing to note. Eddie Brock throughout the comics and everything, as much as he was kind of simplified into this like brutish monster as a villain, Eddie Brock as a character in his character design always wanted to be a hero.
Right, because he idolized Spider-Man.
It wasn't so much that he idolized Spider-Man,
but he like respected him.
He was kind of jealous of him. Like it was a very. It wasn't an as nuanced but similar sort of thing as Lex Luthor and Superman.
Right.
Where Lex Luthor wants to make the world a better place. He just can't stand Superman. Like Eddie Brock wants to be a hero, but he doesn't know the right way of going about it. And like there was a whole bunch of stuff that got wrapped up into that. So it'll be interesting to see where Sony takes this.
Yeah, I'm curious. I hope it succeeds, honestly, with any like superhero film property, because I want this to keep going. But yeah, it has the potential to do really well. I'm just curious to see how they'll make it work without Spider-Man in it.
It should be pretty cool. In other casting news, so A Silent Voice was released last year in Japan. Huge amounts of critical acclaim for this. It actually stole away a lot of critics' awards from another major release that we're going to be talking about in a moment. But it's coming to North America in next year, I think. And in the dubbing cast, we've
this one,
we've added the name Lexi Cowden to play one of the lead roles of Shoko in A Silent Voice's English dub. And the reason why this is important and the reason why we're talking about it, A Silent Voice is the story about a former elementary school bully trying to reconnect with and apologize for the person he was to this deaf girl that he bullied that was a part of the class.
Right.
And the deaf girl's name is Shoko. The reason why this is newsworthy, Lexi Cowden is a deaf actress working in Hollywood.
See, that's really awesome. That I like.
Yeah, so it's not going to be a well-known voice or like a totally unknown voice that's just pretending to be deaf. This is an actual deaf person that's going to be attempting to that's going to be giving voice to this character.
More casting like that is what Hollywood needs, honestly.
It really does. And to be perfectly frank, if you haven't read this manga or seen like a fan dub of this film, like throw as much money at this as you can. Like it's one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking stories you will ever come into contact with.
I'll give it a look. I'm one of those people who haven't seen it, so
yeah. But in other animation news, Don, you had something on
we've
this.
got a live action adaptation of Your Name in the works. Now, Your Name was a anime film from Japan last year that basically grossed $350 million in its like run, which I guess it means it's pretty good and it's beloved. The production company J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot and himself are connected to this adaptation.
So they're making a live action English adaptation of Your Name. Okay, so my concern with everyone's concerns with this are what they've been with like
all the adaptations.
Yeah, like Ghost in the Shell, with Death Note, where it's just like, okay, like Your Name was a massive blockbuster success in Japan.
Yeah.
But its story is born out of, and its central themes are born out of Japanese culture and the way that Japanese society is structured. And like we had this discussion before when we were talking about
Death Note.
That its story was adapted. But its original story is a reflection of certain aspects of culture. It's the same thing with A Silent Voice. Its complexity comes from the way that young people growing up in Japan see themselves as and how that ties into their culture and its cultural values. And now you have another adaptation being done, and it's being done by a director who, let's be honest, doesn't often have a message.
And you know what? And the thing for me is the adaptation, right? With any adaptation, you have to look at who your audience is, right?
Yeah.
And you can go wrong in the way that, okay, our audience is North American. Let's give this a North American lens. Sure, you could do that. You could probably do it well. But if the subject matter strictly adheres to this certain culture, why not just directly adapt it based off of what is already done? You have the audience there. You have the fan base there. Why not just adapt it that way?
Or if you want to do an adaptation for a North American audience with the North American value and cultural history, change the title. Just don't do it under the same title. People are going to obviously say, oh yeah, that's based off of that. Like a good example is The Hunger Games versus Battle Royale.
Oh yeah.
And we've talked about that before in a previous episode, that the two are essentially the same story, but they are geared towards two completely different audiences, and you see the difference that makes in the themes presented, in the character designs and everything like that. If you re-released Hunger Games as Battle Royale under that title, it is a complete departure from the original story.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of weird to me, and I understand. Okay, it's not weird. It's a marketing strategy that, oh, this was super popular. Let's keep the name. Let's change everything else about it.
Yeah.
Just change the name.
Yeah.
Just have the guts. Like, everyone steals from everyone. It's how art functions.
Well, you could also like rename the whole entire title, and then, you know, with any sort of movie adaptation, just like based off of, right? Because if it's based off a novel or whatever, they'll be like, I don't know, the day the Earth stood still is, right. So they'll do alien invasion based off of the day the Earth stood still.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to use the exact name, and I get that like using the title of the book in the film's title helps sell it and helps get the buzz going, but you can totally do it without doing that.
Yeah, you can. It's just we're not dumb. And that's the bit that bothers me. When you are going to directly rip off something and present it with your own cultural ideals and through that lens, just change the title. How hard would it be to change the name of Death Note into Magical Bookman, but release it and have its own sort of commentary about North America's protest system and the way that young people jump on campaigns?
You could have totally done Death Note in that way, and it would have worked.
Yeah, just don't call it Death Note.
Yeah. The one thing, though, is we've seen that if J.J. Abrams is passionate about a project, he does it well. Right? He puts a lot of heart and soul into making it the best possible version of what it could be.
Yeah.
So here's hoping that he loved the movie.
Yeah. We will see how it goes, but we can all see where the lines of protest and everything are going to be for this film.
For sure.
So, moving right along into other adaptations and news things, we got news for Terminator 6. And we can do that because we don't own the musical rights, so we needed to...
we needed to do it without actually using the music.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to be returning to the role. He's in Terminator 6, and Terminator 6 is a sequel to Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Yes, so it's counting out everything that's come out after Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It's also going to be using the explanation from the last couple of Terminator movies where, well, he's a robot, he's like a cyborg, but he's got human flesh that ages and ages and grays as he does. So that's going to be the explanation for a non-CGI Arnold Schwarzenegger running around.
I mean, okay, yeah, I'm okay with that.
It's totally a good move.
It's supposed to be set 60 odd years after, or 40 odd years after the events of Judgment Day.
Okay.
Of the end of of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the movie.
And they're bringing back Nerdling Rush, bad with names. Linda Hamilton.
Yeah.
For her role, Sarah Connor.
Yeah, which is really interesting because we haven't seen her in anything mainstream in a while. The last movie I saw her in was one of those summer releases that's just like, oh, it's about God and horses. No, straight up, that was the movie. It was about this. It was about this girl who's tied to her faith and feels that God will solve things for her, and she wants to become like a champion. Equestrian rider.
Yeah.
And Linda Hamilton played her mother, and she's just like, no, don't worry. If God wants this for you, and here's the college money, and go and live your dreams and be and like.
But anyway, we're excited to see her back in the role. James Cameron is attached to this one as a producer, so he hasn't been attached to any of the Terminator movies since Judgment Day.
Yeah.
And we've got Tim Miller directing it. Yeah. So I'm curious to see where this goes. That it's going to ignore all the continuity that messed up Terminator in the first place is a good thing.
Yep, 3 all the way to 5 is just totally its own timeline, so they're kind of doing a J.J. Abrams...
retcon!
Not so much retcon as Star Trek. Hey, how do you make it new without pissing off the fans?
Fair enough.
And continuing it forward.
Yeah. I'm curious to see if we're going to see a John Connor.
Yeah, it should be interesting because what we always saw was the time travel narrative and trying to fix the problem before it became a problem.
Yeah.
In Terminator Salvation, I think it was, we finally got our first look at, okay, here's the ongoing war with the machines, but even that was before John Connor sends Kyle Reese back in time. So if this is picking up way later, where it's just like, okay, he sent Kyle Reese back, but Judgment Day is maybe inevitable. Maybe this is post John Connor, what's happened to the world. So who knows? Who knows what we will see? I am looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And it actually comes out on July 26, 2019, so that's 35 years after Terminator 1 originally released, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
They're keeping the release date.
Other bits of news, Rick and Morty Season 3 beat out Big Bang Theory as the most watched comedy on television. Good,
it should stay that way.
Yeah, we have issues with Big Bang Theory, and considering that this isn't like a dumb show that's getting that, like Rick and Morty, as much as people laugh about its off-kilter and ridiculous humor and its like surrealism, there's a lot of very heavy sci-fi concepts that are presented and explored within it, and they're done in a very mature and very and sometimes very subtle ways. It's a tremendously intelligent show, and people don't often give it credit for that.
I love how meta it is, but can still remain as entertaining and as relevant as it can be.
Yeah, and especially with Season 3, because the first 2 seasons you could really watch anything you wanted in any order. It didn't really matter.
Yeah.
Except for the season finale of... the season premiere of Season 2 you need to watch that after the season finale of 1, because they directly tie in.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it was free game. Season 3, not so much. You need to watch it in order, because now it actually has an established...
A linear release.
Yeah, it has a linear and established continuity now. So
plot, there's the word. A linear plot, yes. Episode by episode.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
But while it has that, it's also gotten a hell of a lot heavier with its concepts, with its stories.
Right.
It's gotten a bit darker, or at least it's more open about how dark it always was.
Fun.
So yeah.
Fun. What else do we have? We've got
So Blade Runner news. So Blade Runner 2049 split a lot of fans of the original film, going, they're just remaking it, or oh no, it's a sequel, and they're just going to ruin it, and it's just going to be some sort of stupid cash grab. So two quick things out of this. We had an anime released that actually covers part of the history between the original Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
It was done by the same animation studio that did Cowboy Bebop. So, yeah, perfect.
Super awesome.
So go and watch that. It's super, super good, and I'm not going to get into it because it's Blade Runner, and you shouldn't have things explained to you in Blade Runner. You
have to experience them.
Exactly. But the early reviews are coming in for 2049, and they're going, no, this is a masterpiece.
Nice.
That's
what it needs.
Yeah, it doesn't just borrow the skin and the aesthetic from the first movie. The first film had lessons and explorations about humanity, and this continues in that tradition. It's about something. It has a message. It has an exploration to it, and it's handled with deft. And like it has its flaws.
Yeah, as with any movie, really.
Yeah, like Arrival had flaws. I still weep during that film. Like it's still an amazing movie.
Yeah.
With early reviews coming out, just going, no, this is really, really great. I'm so looking forward to this.
We've got some Stranger Things Season 2 news. Essentially, what you may have already assumed for yourself is confirmed in that the villain for Season 2 will be a Lovecraftian shadow monster.
Yeah, we saw bits of this in the trailer, just in quick flashes, with like the sky going red and some sort of giant, like, I don't know, root system like thing out on the horizon. And
I really like the aesthetic that they throw in that show. Like it's very well done.
Oh my god, yes. But like the big question was, we destroyed or banished
the thing from the last season.
Demogorgon. That's what they called it. Whatever that creature was, the thing that they called
the
Demogorgon.
thing from the last season.
That stranger thing from the last season.
Yeah, now we get a stranger thing in the second season.
Yeah, and they say Lovecraftian, and you look at the trailer and you see like that giant thing on the horizon, and I'm just sitting there going, that's either a crack in reality or that is this thing's body in some way.
Yeah, it's probably the body.
I am so down for that.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be cool. What else do we got? We got
actually related to that. It, and two stories out of It.
What about It?
So first of all, like one of the kids from Stranger Things season 1 and 2, he was one of the kids in It. And if you haven't seen that movie and you're okay with scary stuff, go and watch that movie. But it won't matter because it's already made bank. It is now officially the highest grossing horror film of all time.
Yeah.
It's crossed the $500 million threshold.
It make even more so than, I think the highest grossing horror movie before that was 1973's The Exorcist.
Yeah.
That goes to show you how much of a gap there is between these things.
Well,
and it may bring, like, I don't want to say the word legitimize because horror movies are out there, but it may legitimize it may be like that next wave of genre films that we get.
Yeah, actually, I think legitimize is a good word to use for it, because what you normally get in horror films are just, oh no, it's the scary thing, and it's either like gory or creepy, but there's never any sort of message behind it. Mm-hmm. And even The Exorcist didn't really have much of a message. It was just, how can we shock and terrify people?
Right.
Cabin in the Woods, though, did have a message. And it was how stupid all of this stuff is because it doesn't have a message.
That's a good movie. Take some time to watch Cabin in the Woods.
But then you hit It, and it actually has a message. It's about coming together. It's about standing unified against the horrors and trials in your life, and that you can overcome things by coming together. Mm-hmm. Whereas every horror movie is, oh, let's split up.
Let's separate, because our odds are better that way.
Exactly. Oh, we need to get out of here. We better all go in different directions. And now that we know that people are being murdered, like, come on.
Anyways, it's a pretty successful film. So much so that Russian Burger King is asking the Russian government to take it out of the theaters. You may be asking, why is that? Why that may be?
Why may that be, Dom?
Because Pennywise the Clown looks an awful like a Burger King competitor's mascot, Ronald McDonald.
I knew it.
And their claim is essentially that this Pennywise the Clown and the movie may be giving free advertising to McDonald's. Come on.
Okay, like, the memes are there. I think it's more advertising as a result of memes and, like, people making the jokes.
But, like, come on. Like, there's no way that the correlation between I'm gonna crap my pants because this is a scary movie makes you want to go eat some McDonald's. Like, let's be real here.
But it gets McDonald's in the mind, and I think that's what their entire thing is. But, like, at the same time, then, couldn't you make the case that, oh no, you better not show any movie that
features a royal person?
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, no, the King's speech brought up Burger King sales, like, so much.
King Arthur tanked Burger King sales.
Yeah, they really should be more... Burger King should really be holding studios to account.
Yeah, seriously.
Like,
come on.
I understand it, but it's kind of ridiculous. It's more than kind of ridiculous. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
But whatever. It's the world that we live in, I guess. Stranger things have happened.
Ha! That's a good... Oh, look at you go.
Meta jokes.
You're good at those. You're good at those. Too bad it wasn't too bad we weren't transitioning into Stranger Things, because that would have been beautiful.
It's a callback. People maybe go back and listen to the Stranger Things thing that we were talking about.
Why would they go back 5 minutes for?
I don't know. Why would people go and get a McDouble after watching Pennywise eat children?
Because they vacated their bowels and they're hungry.
I would not be hungry after that movie. I wasn't hungry after that movie.
With that, we move into... What else, Mo? What do we move into? Oh, so unorganized. What's going on?
Well, we've got Star Trek Discovery that hit airwaves.
Oh, right.
First 3 episodes made a big splash. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about this.
And in what way are they talking about it? Now, I wasn't able to watch the first 3 episodes in any capacity.
Okay, I'm going to come at this from as logical and dispassionate a point of view as I can, because...
That's very tough for you.
Yeah, I know, right? The thing is, like, Star Trek and Star Wars were the foundational works of fiction in my youth. I am a fan of both of them.
Yes, and as you should be.
So, and here's the thing. Star Trek hasn't been excitable about in a long while. There were serious problems with Into Darkness. Star Trek Beyond kind of recaptured some of the magic, but by then it was too late. Like, people had kind of moved on from it. And Star Trek Discovery, it brought a lot of people back into the fold, and a lot of people are disappointed because, okay, I understand the disappointments.
And where do those disappointments lie?
One of the biggest disappointments for a lot of the fan base, and especially for me, is why are you going back to pre-Kirk?
Oh.
The whole point of Star Trek was looking forward, looking into the future, and using that as a vehicle for criticizing our present.
Right.
And you got that in the original Star Trek. You got that in The Next Generation. It was kind of preachy in The Next Generation, but it was there. You got that in Deep Space Nine.
Mm-hmm.
Less so in Voyager, and certainly less so in Enterprise.
Yeah,
and then Enterprise finally just canceled the series. And now we're again going back to pre-Kirk, which has been, and the movies have been Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't had a future-looking Star Trek since Voyager. Enterprise happened pre-Kirk. the 3 J.J. Abrams films are about Kirk, Spock, and the gang. It's baffling to me that you can take a concept about progress and stagnate it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other big things is that people are looking at this and they're just going, okay, everything looks flashy, everything kind of looks high-tech.
Visually, it from what I've seen, it looks really cool. The design, the costumes, the set design, like the world that they're in, it looks really awesome.
Yeah, they're continuing with the aesthetic established with J.J. Abrams. So the question is still kind of up in the air. Whether this is a precursor to the Abrams continuity, or if this is...
the Roddenberry continuity.
Exactly. Yeah. Because they are 2 distinct continuities now, and you need to look at them that way. We'll see what happens going forward with it. We've only gotten the first 3 episodes, and here's where I take hope for the series.
Okay.
The series already has as a central theme the conflict between nationalism and isolationalism versus coming together and building something more as a wider community. The central conflict in the first 3 episodes is on the wider scale is with a faction of Klingons who want things the way that they were in the good old days, where the Empire needs to be conquering, otherwise it's stagnating. And because there is a concern that since joining the Federation, or not since joining the Federation, since making peace with the Federation, they've hit a lurch as a culture and as a people. They're no longer expanding, and they're kind of regressing. So you have this movement. They're talking about the Republicans. They're basically just going, look at the Republicans. This is insane.
Okay.
Which is right back to what the core of Star Trek was for a long time. And then on a kind of smaller level, with regards to this central character, she is a human who grew up and was on Vulcan. She was raised in a Vulcan culture. She sees herself as Vulcan,
but she is not.
Yeah. So the idea of cultural appropriation and being part of a culture that the rest of your race isn't born to is really interesting. I've made a joke a couple of times with my friends, or not so much a joke, a funny story. When I was younger, I met a girl, a Caucasian girl, whose family had moved from Canada to Jamaica. She was born there, spent many years there, and then the family moved back to Canada. She spoke with the Jamaican accent, and it was kind of...
threw you off a bit.
Yeah, it did throw me, and I'll admit that. That you have a blonde-haired, hazel-eyed young woman speaking with a thick Jamaican accent, but she sees herself as culturally Jamaican because that is her culture.
Yeah.
The way that they've created space to explore that, I think, is really great. They're holding to these central tenets of Star Trek, which I like. And on top of that, and the biggest thing that gives me hope for this series, TNG's first 2 seasons compared to its last 2 seasons, night and day difference. Deep Space Nine, first 2 seasons compared to its last 2 seasons, night and day difference. This is getting its footing right now. It doesn't quite know where it's going and what it wants to be, and it will develop that as things go along. I am a longtime Trek fan. I have hope that this will only improve with time.
Right.
That being said, I will admit, not since Deep Space Nine have we had improved Star Trek. Because Voyager, from its beginning to its end, wasn't that great. Enterprise finally got good in its final season, but by then it had been dreck for so long that people didn't care.
Yeah, the audience had left.
Exactly, and they weren't going to come back. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on Star Trek Discovery. I'm looking forward to it, seeing how things continue. It's kind of weird though that the Orville is actually doing better
than Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know,
we talked about it a couple episodes ago.
The Orville is Seth Meyers going.
Seth MacFarlane.
Sorry, Seth MacFarlane. There's a lot of Seths in Hollywood.
Just like there's a lot of Chris's.
Yes, Chris's and Seths. I wonder if they go to war, who would win? Anyway, you have Seth MacFarlane in the lead role and as like a central producer, and I think even director for.
But basically a spoof of Star Trek.
Yeah. So you remember Galaxy Quest? Imagine that as a TV series,
but ramped up to 11.
Yeah. And it gets like the sort of adventure hijinks side of Star Trek down just perfectly from the original series, but it can get away with doing that simply because it's a spoof of them.
Right.
So yeah, like that's been a lot of fun too.
Yeah, but let us know what you think. Have you seen Star Trek Discovery yet? Do you want to see it? What are your likes and dislikes so far? What are you expecting from it?
All right. Do you want me to do the Kingsman review since we're doing reviews?
We're in the middle of reviewing things. Let's do some Kingsman stuff.
Cool.
Well, of course you can, Mo. Go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Kingsman review.
It's not like we have a director above us. We're basically controlling everything here.
Or are we?
Oh no, NBC's got their hooks in. No, they don't.
Oh my god.
Wouldn't that be amazing though?
Yes.
So we want sponsors. Speaking
Please help us eat.
I'm so hungry. So
Kingsman 2, Mo. The Golden Circle. How was it? In 3 words or less.
More of the same.
Okay, cool. I like that. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, which isn't a bad thing. Like
Guardians 2 was more of the same.
Yes. And so it falls into some of the same problems, but it has many of the same successes. What made the first Kingsman kind of a breakout hit and an unexpected hit wasn't the meta commentary. Or rather, it was stylistically done meta commentary that surprised you, because the beginning of the film is like your average fare.
Right.
It's a spy movie where a kid's recruited into it, and you see his training, and things aren't quite what they seem, and hey, look at this sort of tech billionaire, and what are his nefarious Bond villain-esque plans, and oh, that's what it is, and all of that. But what set it apart was it was a villain that you could get behind.
You understand why he's doing things.
Exactly. You don't agree with his methods, but him just going, no, we need a radical response to human overpopulation. It's just that if we did that response, who would come out ahead? The rich and the powerful.
Yeah.
It would still be at the cost of everybody else. Kingsman 2 starts off in much the same way. You have Eggsy, Roxy, and Merlin, who were the 3 remaining surviving members of Kingsman that we got to know. They are now like the core of the continuing Kingsman. You have the main villain is actually the world's greatest entrepreneur drug dealer, and her organization is called the Golden Circle. And what's really cool about her is her entire motivation in the film is I laced all of my drugs with a poison that becomes fatal in X amount of days. Everyone who has a blue rash right now, weed, heroin, cocaine, ecstasy, like anything that I've touched, which is everything. I own basically 80% of the global illicit drug trade. That will become fatal soon. So I am talking to you, the American president, because I've given up on the UN's ability to have any sort of action. And to you, Mr. President, legalize all of this stuff. So we can get the economy jump-started, we can deal with the actual problems, and we can move forward and past this drug war that hasn't worked. That's brilliant!
Yeah, that's a pretty cool concept.
That is actually pretty smart. Now, there's a lot more to it. There's additional twists in the movie that I'm not going to give away because they are really smart. The flaws of the film happen at the beginning of the film. If you can get to the halfway point, you will enjoy the rest of it.
Right.
Which was the same thing that you saw with the first movie.
And it's pretty action-packed as much as the first one, and they kind of do similar sort of sequences and stuff like that?
Yes.
Like they build off of what was successful with the fighting sequences?
Yes. The stylized way of doing things.
Yeah. Is it hyper stylized, pretty much?
It's not hyper stylized. You have like the sort of shaky cam jump cuts, which lend it a sense of flair, which is really nice. And you don't have anything that matches that insane and just brilliant Freebird action scene in the Hate Church from the first movie.
Yeah.
But you get... It comes close to that a bunch of times. It's more emotionally involving.
Yeah.
Now, there is a scene in the middle of the film that highlights and points out just how sleazy, rapey, and horrible the old trope of honeypotting the female so you can get information, like seducing the woman and everything as a super spy, where they take it too far for way too long. You totally get what the message is behind this inside of the first 30 seconds, and it just keeps hammering at you with it, and it takes it way, way too far. It's already upset a bunch of people, and I think if this was a more popular release, you would have seen a lot more of a social media reaction.
Because I like leading up to it, it had a lot of buzz going in, and then once it came out, it just sort of like, I'm not gonna say fizzled, but it wasn't like.
It didn't take off.
Yeah, it wasn't like, oh, Kingsman The Golden Circle is like so awesome and blah blah blah, and you need to see this and da 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 da. It just kind of came out.
Yeah, and I understand the response because this isn't a movie where you're just like, no, you have to see this. It suffers from the same problem as John Wick.
Right. Yeah.
And we talked about this before when we discussed John Wick 2, that the great thing about the original John Wick was you didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
And it was incredible. John Wick 2, you knew what to expect. So you got cool nods to the first movie. You got plenty of nods to the first movie. You had cool sequences, but it was more of the same and the surprise element was gone. And it's the same thing with Kingsman.
Yeah.
Is it still a good movie? Yeah, it's
entertaining.
It's a super entertaining film that at times is more clever than it has any right to be, but it still suffers from many of the same flaws of the first film, and it tries to build on stuff while still having callbacks. And it's good. Like the Bond films are good.
It doesn't do sort of, and this is kind of the example that you turn to, but it doesn't do anything for the franchise that Empire did for Star Wars.
Yes.
Right? Like Empire came out and arguably you could say that it was better than A New Hope.
Yes.
Right? Because it did different things, it took it to a different place, it wasn't as hopeful and renewed, it changed sort of the focus of the film, and it worked in that sense. And it doesn't mean that you always have to do that, but I think keeping in mind when you're trying to create a franchise that going forward, as much as you try to do the same sort of thing, you have to spin it a bit in a different way, which what I think sets Guardians 2 apart compared to Kingsman is Guardians 2 compared to Guardians Volume 1 had more of an emotional feel to it. It dealt with the parenthood of Peter Quill and everyone in general, and sort of their relationship to each other and what does family mean. It explored these bigger themes, which I think really helped separate it from the first one.
Yeah.
But in the same way, it helped connect it to the first one.
Yes. And juxtaposed to that, the original Kingsman was more of an action flick than it was an emotionally driven drama.
Exactly.
This one tries to lean heavier on emotion, but it's still about schlocky spies that are either British gentlemen or cowboys.
Yeah. I mean, it's entertaining. It's a fun ride. Yeah, and if that's what you're into, then go see it.
Yeah, it is a fun ride, and it's well worth checking out.
And do you think that we could see Kingsman be the new sort of Bond in our time? That it might be what replaces Bond in our current mindset?
I think it's running parallel to the Lego movies.
Okay.
Because Lego Ninjago is another one of these films where it's just like, why is this better than it should be?
Right.
And it also deals, like, Lego Ninjago also deals with, like, consumerist culture and everything like that, in the same way that the Lego movie dealt with that, in the same way that the Lego Batman movie dealt with its own themes. Lego Ninjago is also about parentage, legacy, and everything else that's built up around that.
Kids are getting some awesome movies.
They really are.
Why do us adults get the crapshoot?
Well, considering you've had 3 Lego movies that are about family dysfunctions, I think someone working at the Lego Corporation really needs a call from their mom or dad. Like, if you're disappointed in your successful man-child, whoever you are, just make the goddamn phone call. But yeah, in the same way that the Lego films have been about consumerist culture and about family values and family dysfunction, I can definitely see the Kingsman series going forward and going, what if you had an amoral person in a schlocky way trying to solve actual world problems?
Yeah.
Because, again, I agree with highlighting this is a problem. I just disagree, and even with part of the solution, but I disagree with the amorality of it.
Yes. And with that, something amoral to something sinister, we move into some Marvel news. We've got photo stills from the Runaways TV show.
This is so cool.
This is okay. So just to give you guys some backstory, the Runaways is one of these Marvel properties that was really different from everything else that it's been a part of, right? That it's entrenched in comics culture, and it was something that really struck a chord.
Yeah.
Because of how different it is and how it dealt with the subject matter. But it also has been begging to be adapted since its inception.
Yes. Now, The Runaways has been a project on the Marvel docket for more than a decade.
Yeah.
And it's been, like, on the back burner. There have been rumors all over the place. We've talked about it a bunch of times on this show, especially in our early episodes. But, like, it's finally being produced into a series, which is what is best for it.
It's going to be on Hulu, if I'm not wrong.
Great. They've been working on getting Hulu in Canada, according to their page every time you log in from a Canadian IP address. So I'm sure it's a matter of any day now.
Right.
And I've been seeing that message since I was 13!
Someone's not bitter. Anyways, Runaways.
So the general story of Runaways is you have a bunch of kids who kind of get along. Their parents are all friends with one another.
Yeah.
And they get together like once a year for this huge family gathering, or like friends of family gathering, and the kids are kind of expected to just hang out in an arcade room.
Just chill out and have fun while the parents hang out.
Yeah. So imagine you and your posse meeting up years after college. You all have kids and significant others, and you just expect all of the whole family units to just get along. That's basically what things are. All of the families are very successful and everything.
But the really interesting thing about the kids is they're not necessarily the popular ones. They're more of the outsiders.
In some ways. A bunch of them are.
If you look at them compared to sort of the traditional teen kind of figures, they're definitely more of the outsider.
They are, and they were I don't want to give away like the central twist of anything.
Because you can't like break it down like crazy.
Yeah.
You know what? We'll throw spoilers. If you haven't read it and you intend on watching it and you know nothing of the Runaways, these are spoilers. Go away. Come back later. Yeah, but don't listen to this part.
Yeah, so this little part is the kids find out that their parents are actually a team of supervillains. That's where the fortune comes from. But the thing is, all of the kids are subtly being groomed to join this society called the Pride. To
take their parents' place, essentially.
Yeah, so all of them either have abilities that they're unaware of or are about to inherit technologies that will allow them to become super powered.
And the really cool thing that I liked about the series is it's on the West Coast.
Yeah.
It's not in New York like literally every Marvel property ever.
So it's dealing with its own issues, and what I loved about the team, so spoilers end here. What I loved about the team was that you had representation for characters that you normally didn't. You had a young black kid, you had a plus-size girl that was dealing with some body issues, you had a goth girl that knew kind of who she was and everything, and had a measure of confidence and vulnerability. Like, these were well-designed, complex characters, and they're just dealing with the legacy and inheritance of their family. In essence, that's what the whole thing about the Runaways is. So from what we saw in the stills, the casting looks bang on. The characters look almost exactly like their counterparts from the comic. And honestly, you could almost like panel for panel, you could air this and it would be a successful series.
Yeah, because there's so much, like the series itself is so well done, you don't really need to change much. Like it lends itself well to being adapted panel by panel. I agree with you completely.
Yeah, so it's going to be really cool to see how things go forward with that, because I am really looking forward to Marvel's other TV properties outside of like
Netflix,
outside of Netflix and outside of the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, because as we saw with Legion, and now as we seem to be seeing with this, when it's left out of that universe and more creative control is given over to different directors, it's creating something that's quite spectacular. At least it was with Legion. I hope it is with Runaways.
Yeah. Good things, hopefully, because the fans of these characters have been waiting for it to be adapted and for it to be good.
Yeah. But speaking about creative control and not being tied down, Dom, you were excited about something. That's actually going to be our main issue of discussion today.
Yes, the DC Extended Universe is getting some changes brought towards it. Now, essentially, they're adopting this new approach in the same vein that Wonder Woman, the film, has. They're taking notes from the successful thing that they've done and decided that their continuity won't be rigidly connected in so much as the MCU is in certain respects. Now, I'm going to pull up the quote, and bear with me here, from the head of DC's movie side. What's her name? Diane Nelson, and to DC Entertainment president. Now, she says, "Our intention, certainly moving forward, is using the continuity to help make sure nothing is diverging in a way that doesn't make sense. But there is no insistence upon an overall storyline or interconnectivity in that universe. Moving forward, you'll see the DC movie universe being a universe, but one that comes from the heart of the filmmaker who's creating them." She goes on to say that while Wonder Woman contained nods to Batman v Superman, which introduced Gal Gadot as the Wonder Woman character, you don't need to have seen it to understand the standalone.
Yeah. Which is cool. So the reason why this is kind of making waves right now, or at least we're splashing in the pool and making them, is they seem to be saying that you will have a couple of movies where these characters tie in with one another, and there's going to be little spots where they tie together, but otherwise, in terms of the tone, pacing, and maybe even cinematic style of the films, that's going to be up to the directors and
producers and whoever.
To which I say, it seems to be that they are learning some lessons from Wonder Woman and trying to correct their mismanagement from before, because
from Wonder Woman, Suicide Squad, and Batman v Superman, they're sort of taking all of that and going, okay, what worked and what didn't, what can we do moving forward?
And I love their maturity with this, and just going, you know what, we don't have the basis, as a lot of people have been saying, we don't have the basis to create a unified cinematic universe the same way that Marvel has.
Because they kind of just jumped in.
Exactly. They jumped in with the big thing right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And we've said that on this show a couple of times. There is no reason why Batman v Superman, tying in with Wonder Woman and having Justice League and Suicide Squad and all of these things happened all together without origin films for these various characters. There was no reason to do it that way.
And, you know, they just sort of went, okay, well, we're going to do our own universe. Right? Instead of taking the steps that Marvel had done where they had released their movies one by one and sort of hinted at the fact that they were going to do a team up, and then they did it and it worked, and so they kept going and they had this big overarching plan.
Yeah.
Whereas I think DC sort of just, they were like, oh, okay, well, we had plans to do this, now everyone knows, so let's just go and do it.
Yeah, and to show the comparison, you have other studios that are trying to do the same thing. You had the
Dark Universe.
You had the Dark Universe that,
so the Mummy and all the monster movies.
Yeah, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, and all that stuff, which you gave that movie, The Mummy, which was supposed to set the stage for this, to the same person that kneecapped Amazing Spider-Man. And of course he kneecapped this entire universe right from the get-go. But on the other side of things, you have the kaiju universe as well. With Kong, Skull Island, with Godzilla, which wasn't that great. But hey, Kong Skull Island was pretty cool, and
they seem to know where they're going.
Yeah, they really do seem to know where they're headed, and the same way that Marvel did it, where it's just like, hey, establishing movie, crossover movie, or like hints of a crossover movie. And then what DC is saying is, we tried the established universe thing, putting it all together and putting it all out there. People didn't like it. There wasn't enough creative control for people to create, and the person that fought the hardest and got it the most independent from other people's styles was the one that's been the most successful and the most beloved.
Yeah. We even get some words from Jeff Johns, who's the president and chief creative officer at DC Entertainment. He's saying that the movies aren't going to be about another movie. Some of them will have them connect with the other characters, like in Justice League. But if we look forward with Aquaman, our goal is not to connect Aquaman to every movie.
Okay, so let's take a moment to talk about how this is like and unlike Marvel, and how this may or may not function. So, is this radically different from Marvel? I say no.
No, because this is sort of, if you look at it, this is kind of what Marvel did at the start, right?
I would go further to say this is what Marvel's currently doing as well. But go on.
But
finish your point.
I really feel that the whole notion of it's about these characters, sure they'll come together, and sure they're living in this same space, but they're not going to be, you know, the Adventures of Aquaman and Batman movie, you know what I mean? So in the way that Marvel sort of started out, where yes, Iron Man lives in this world, yes, the Hulk lives in this world, yes, Thor has made his appearance in this world, and all these other characters are here, and there's small nods to each of them in every movie, they're not essentially about all these characters coming together, which is what they sort of threw at you at the beginning with, they did the ensemble pieces at the start.
Yes. Well, okay. In the way that this is not that, what DC is saying is not that different from what Marvel was doing, and I would say is still doing, is that when you take a look at the Marvel films, most of them stand very independently with only little nods. So let's take Wonder Woman as the example from DC. Wonder Woman has 2 scenes tying it to the rest of the universe.
Yes.
With Batman's letter at the beginning, and then at the conclusion of her memories, putting the things away and, like, another thing from Batman.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. The reason why you can do Wonder Woman's origin story and have it that far removed is because it happens decades before anything in Batman v Superman, or in Man of Steel.
Literally 100 years before.
Exactly. So that's all cool. You can do that. You can set it up that way. Now compare that to the Winter Soldier. You had the establishment of Captain America in Captain America: The First Avenger. You had him appear in Avengers, and then you had the Winter Soldier, where they go, oh yeah, S.H.I.E.L.D's a thing, but that was part of the very first Captain America movie right at the conclusion. So it picked up as a sequel to that. You didn't have Iron Man show up or even contacted. You didn't have the Hulk show up or even contacted. Black Widow was there, and she was really the only addition. And then you had the introduction of Falcon. But considering neither of them are getting their own movies, they are really part of, like, the Captain America landscape. Okay, cool, I'm down with that. There was very little in that movie that tied it directly to Avengers.
Right.
Or even made Avengers required viewing. Take a look at Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Apart from a couple of lines, that establishes that this is happening in the same universe, does that movie rely on the other films?
No.
Look at Ant-Man. Look at both Guardians of the Galaxy films. Like, Marvel's already doing this.
Yeah.
Really, the only film that really stands apart is Captain America: Civil War, because that was an Avengers movie. That wasn't a Captain America movie.
That was, Avengers 2.5.
Yeah. That's what people had been hoping Age of Ultron would have been.
Yeah.
And really, I could, and you can certainly make the case, and I would make the case, that Thor Ragnarok falls into that as well. Right. Where, why is the Hulk somewhere off in space? Oh yeah, because of the events of Civil War, and now that's being tied into that. But Black Panther, we will see how much that relies on what was established in Civil War.
I think maybe, yeah, like I don't think it'll be very heavy. It'll probably take place maybe just after, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the smart move. The smartest move DC's makes so far is to go, okay, yeah, we don't have to have a rigid timeline. Marvel doesn't even have a rigid timeline. Some of their things, right, as far as continuity goes, it isn't exactly 100% to the T. It happened at this time, that time, that time. They sort of up in the air, but you sort of get the linear fashion that it's going in.
Yeah. Now, I will admit that Marvel has been creating stronger connections between the movies lately.
Right.
Certainly with Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Yeah.
But they still overall do stand generally apart from one another. It does sound like DC's going, no, we're going to keep things a little bit further afield than Marvel's doing. But considering you have one movie that was both a financial and critical success out of 4, it's still early days. Let's see if this is something that pays off for them. Because as we've seen with other films, what makes Star Wars work as a cohesive whole is that it has a generally continuous aesthetic and tone. Same thing with the Marvel films. You have iterations where it goes a little afield in a couple of places, but when it comes back to center, it's the same continuous center. If DC goes too far afield, this is all going to collapse.
Yeah.
The sort of blue tone that Zack Snyder does, if you maintain that throughout all the movies, I think that might be enough, because that's what they've done so far.
And I mean, yeah, that seems to be what's going on, right? Even with the Justice League, the sort of the stuff we've been seeing is it's very Zack Snyder-esque color palette wise, but then you get sort of things coming out of Matt Reeves saying that when he's going to do his Superman sequels, he wants to have it in the vein of the Richard Donner Supermans. So bright and colorful and hopeful.
Yeah, there was actually news on that in terms of the original Superman being tied in.
Yeah, so in the Justice League film, the original John Williams Superman theme is going to be featured in the movie. Another reason why I'm super excited for it. Doesn't mean it's going to be awesome, doesn't mean it's going to suck, but I'm just very hopeful that this will be the movie that sort of pushes them in the right direction going forward. I trust Joss Whedon, I trust Jeff Johns to be able to turn this into a great movie.
Yeah, and we should certainly also talk about Zack Snyder being the one that put most of that movie together before Joss Whedon had to step in because of the tragedies that befell Zack Snyder and his family. That being said, how they continue this going forward with the Aquaman film, with the Batman film that's like somewhere in limbo, with the Flash film that's somewhere in limbo.
Yeah, they don't even have a director attached to it yet.
I think that this might be a good move in terms of removing the curse from that, because it really seems like a lot of Hollywood is just going, you know what, if you want to take the chance with these guys, go ahead, but I'm not going to. Like that, I think, might be the attitude that people are approaching DC as a studio at this point. That like it's because we've talked about it numerous times, it is a goddamn mess. It's unrealistic. The level of rewrites, lost directors, just everything happening here.
I mean, Marvel's had like maybe 2 or 3 in their entirety of being a studio.
Have they had page 1 rewrites?
No.
And yet
not that they told us.
And yet twice for Flash, maybe once for Batman. That's pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
But this might be the shakeup that they need to finally get their feet under them. That, okay, you know what? We're not going to, because we're not tying it as strongly to these other properties, you can be a little bit more independent with it. It won't require page 1 rewrites to make sure everything both flows and is your thing.
And you can get directors who are incredibly creative to put their stamp on those characters. Would I have loved to see what the Edgar Wright version of Ant-Man was? Yes. Did I enjoy the movie anyway, despite him not being fully director from day 1 to the final release date? Yeah, I still liked it.
Yeah, and a lot of props go out to the other aspects of the creative team in that. Like Paul Rudd carries that entire film.
Yeah.
Because, well, Paul Rudd is Paul Rudd. That is what he does.
All in all, it seems that DC is making a thoughtful move.
Yes.
Going forward, are they just saying things like they have before? Maybe, but this definitely seems like the correct step to take, and in order to get the best possible movie out of your characters and out of your directors and out of your writers, the whole creative team, and B, be able to tell the stories you want to tell without having to worry about whether or not it'll fit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that. It's what made their animated features so successful for so long.
They've been like, if you compare Marvel's animated stuff versus DC's animated stuff, DC blows them out of the water, no problem.
Oh yeah. The thing is that DC's animated stuff hasn't been of the same caliber in the last little while.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of that is tied to how directly tied those animated films are now to each other, because they used to be more disparate.
Yeah.
Green Lantern First Flight, Under the Red Hood.
Yeah.
Mask of the Phantasm was straight up for a completely different universe. Like, those were really great films.
Yeah.
But then since Justice League War, like even the Wonder Woman movie that they had a while back, that was really good too. But ever since Justice League War, they've been way more tied together, and you can see where it's hampered them in many ways.
Yeah, whereas before it was all separate individual stories a great Batman story or a great Aquaman story or a great what have you Superman story, like a whole bunch of good Superman stuff too. But anyway, yeah, they're sort of taking that mentality from their animated universe where, okay, yeah, this worked because we told a self-contained story that's in the universe that we've created, but it just happens to be about XYZ character.
Yeah, it would be really cool if after Justice League they decided to just do that with all of the properties, where it's just like, hey, you know what was a really cool story? Batman Hush.
Let's do that.
So let's just do Batman Hush. Okay, but what about Wonder Woman and Calling the League? No, let's not even mention them.
Yeah. Because sometimes they can't. Because sometimes they just can't call on their allies, right?
Exactly. And Flash of Two Worlds. Why don't we get that?
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
And even like sort of pepper in nods to what's coming next in the next Justice League movie, right? So they sort of pepper things in a post-credit or an end or like a mid-credit scene or something.
Yeah.
To sort of get you looking forward to what's happening next, and that's maybe how they can tie in.
Yeah.
Man, we should be on the creative team for some sort of big franchise about comic books.
It would be nice, wouldn't it? Wouldn't you agree, faithful listeners?
Internet, what say you?
Wait, would you hire us? I'd hire us. I'd hire us hard.
Yeah, so that's all we really have to say about this DC news.
It was a really news-heavy day.
Yeah, we've now come to the final part of our episode, the pull list. Now, if you recall, the pull list is generally just sort of things we're watching and reading that we recommend for you to give your eyes and ears to. Give it some time.
Yeah. So for me, I'm actually rereading something. Because I hadn't gone through it in a number of years, but it was one of my favorite comics of all time. It's written by Warren Ellis. Warren Ellis is also the guy that wrote the 4-part Castlevania animated thing on Netflix that people went gaga over. Yeah, that is kid stuff compared to this. Warren Ellis wrote this story called Transmetropolitan. It's 10 volumes. It's a complete series.
Yeah.
It's about a journalist, an election, and the way that the press, media, and public and politics all function with one another. It's crude, brash, imaginative, and wonderful. And especially in the current political climate that we're living in, it goes a long, long way. Like, you read this and you're just like, so he started writing this when Trump came down the escalator. No. This was like in the same way that if you watch Deep Space Nine and you're just like, oh, so they're talking about the Iraq War. Wait, this came out in the mid-90s? How? How did they do this? That's exactly what Warren Ellis did with this. So as much as I loved it in my first time through, it's far more poignant now because of the way that the world is now, and the demands that it makes of journalism, and the importance of an informed populace. It's called Transmetropolitan, and it's incredible.
All right, so that sounds like you should definitely give it a look. For me, I think I mentioned this last time, but I'm currently reading Jason Aaron's run on Wolverine.
Oh, yes.
And essentially, what I'm getting right now is he's hunting down Mystique because she's betrayed the X-Men in some capacity, and it's just basically him following her. Like, for what I'm at right now is like 4 issues already. He's following her through the Middle East.
Yes.
She's on the run, and he's trying to catch up to her, and she like messes with him, and we get some flashbacks to their past and how they're sort of connected in that way.
Yeah.
Really cool stuff. What I'm listening to, though, is the Futurama audio drama podcast.
Oh, cool.
So Nerdist, Chris Hardwick from Nerdist put together an idea to do a Futurama episode as an audio drama. Went to Matt Groening and David X. Cohen, and they brought in all the cast and everyone and all the writers, and they made an audio drama, 45 minutes. It is amazing. It is meta. It is everything you love about Futurama, just without the visuals.
Oh man, that's so great.
Definitely give it a listen. It's out there. It's really good stuff.
Alright, and with that, that brings our episode to a close. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Mo.
And I'm Dom. Be sure to find us on all the social medias you have access to. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we are there. Give us your opinions on this episode. Do you like adaptations? Should they stay true? Should they not? Do you think DC's making a good move here with their segue? Are you looking forward to the Runaways? What did you think of Star Trek Discovery?
And why haven't you already bought your ticket for A Silent Voice? Watch that movie!
And that's all we have for you today, guys. Bye-bye.